So by way of, I don't know, maybe a little peek into the process, this might be sort of interesting for some of you. I had a really hard time with this story because it kept bringing other things into it, and it was growing, and it was like wrestling with taffy, you know, sticking to other ideas and pulling them in, which is what politics does. I mean, politics touches everything, and it won't leave anything alone, and once it grabs it, you can try and pull it away. Nothing will help. So it was difficult. It was difficult to try and cleave off parts that weren't important and just stick to the story that I wanted to tell you. And I was walking down the street and I was thinking about politics and what I thought about politics and things I wanted to talk to you about. And I was standing at a corner and I looked up, and this young, just crazy handsome man, I guess he was a man, was just beaming at me. His face, he was smiling and beaming, and you know, as often as this happens, I fall for it every time. And it always takes me a minute before I look, you know, to see, you know, what smock he's wearing or what clipboard's in his hand, and, you know, figure out what we're going to be talking about for the next 10 minutes. Because in real life, you know, this doesn't happen unless he has a clipboard. And I was standing at Queen and Spadina, and the light changed, and people started rushing by me, but he's still smiling at me. And I looked down, and he wasn't wearing a smock. He was wearing something that, you know, looked great on him. And he didn't have a clipboard. And these people started sort of jostling by me and pushing as the light changed and they entered the intersection. And he didn't say anything right away, and he held my eye contact and sort of reached down and pulled up something from a pile that was beside him. And he said, "Sir, could I interest you in a copy of The Socialist Worker?" I know. And I didn't know. I didn't know, like, it's a thing. Like, I had no idea. I mean, it is a thing, and it's in color. And it, you know, is, like, not, like, sort of clunky looking or something. Like, you know, someone's put a little bit of effort into it. And I remember I used to buy it, and, you know, your hands would get covered in this ink, and then you'd scratch your nose, and, you know, like, you'd look like you just walked out of a fucking coal mine, you know, like. And he's holding it out, and he's so earnest, and I don't know what to say. Like, I just didn't know it was a thing, you know? So I just smiled, and I started walking, and I took a couple more steps. And he said, "We're on Facebook, you know, friend us on Facebook." And that's a really wide intersection. So, I mean, we were Facebook friends by the time I hit the west side of Spadina. And I was smiling because this is how it all started. And it all started in exactly the same way. The first time, and not the last time, but I mean, almost the last time, but the very first time I ever bought a copy of The Socialist Worker was at exactly that corner about 26 years ago. And it was just as my interest in politics was, you know, getting going. And the guys were cute too then, you know, they were, I don't know, a little more strident. And I mean, this guy looked like he, you know, had his own cigarettes and could pick up a bar tab or two from time to time, which is great, you know, because that's not how things used to be. But they were always fun to have around, and, you know, everyone loves Billy Bragg. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about this time in my life when, you know, I started to get really excited about politics. And it stayed with me until now. I mean, it's always been enthusiastic, but from the sidelines. I mean, you know, I'm even a bit nerdy. I'll read Hansard, and I know too much about writings, and I I've met a lot of politicians, but you know, I've never really gotten involved. You know, I don't know. I'd probably, you know, canvass if the weather was just so, and it was a nice neighborhood, or I don't know. But you know, like mostly, you know, just, you know, I've always wanted to go to a convention and wear a funny hat, and, you know, sort of kind of thing. But it's always been from the sidelines, and it's funny because from my circle of friends when I was 17, the same time when I was getting really excited about politics, two of the people I knew are members of parliament now. Neither of them had any interest in politics. One was, I mean, it was an accomplishment if you could find both of it matching flip-flops at the time. And I mean, but he's doing great now. And there's a third that's well on his way. But you know, it's always just sort of been, you know, an interest from the sidelines. But I guess that's sort of party politics. Politics, which, you know, we all deal with at work. We deal with it every day. There's, you know, a million different ways. It's one of those words that there's no wrong answers for. Like, it just means everything. You know, it's just like, you know, like politics is, I don't know, just make it up. Like, there's no wrong answers. You know, in some way, everything's political. And, you know, I found this out. I don't know if you're like me and you have some relatives you see once a year, but their lives are just unrecognizable from yours. Like, just absolutely, like, you have nothing in common, and there's nothing safe to talk about, and you just try and just get through it. And someone at the table, you know, thought he, you know, small talk, right? You know, the weather. Oh, it's nice weather. Well, small talk isn't so small, I think you'll find anymore, because a lot of people had a lot of really odd ideas about global warming that came up from mentioning the weather. And I don't know, they were confusing, and it didn't make a lot of sense. But, you know, they had very strong opinions. You know, this is, I mean, there's nothing that's safe. You can't talk about the weather. But there was a time that came in my life when politics got really, really personal and very public. About 12 years ago, I tested HIV positive after a routine test. And it wasn't a big, you know, you don't have tests unless you think that, you know, something might be happening. So it wasn't a huge surprise. But it doesn't mean that it's not a shock, you know, so I tested positive, and I was shocked, and, you know, these things started happening really quickly. I had an appointment made for me the next day with Toronto Public Health, and they had a lot of questions for me about people I'd come in contact with, and they had a very serious conversation with me about my new legal responsibilities as far as sexual contact with people. That I had a legal duty to always disclose my status, and that there were consequences under the criminal code if I didn't. You know, I mean, their job isn't to be charming, these people, but, you know, it was, you know, I don't know. I just, you know, it was a very serious conversation. And also, same day, next day, my doctor had made an appointment for me to meet my specialist. He was going to be my new doctor, specialized in HIV. And he gave me the same conversation. It was exactly the same. But, you know, from a different angle, it was about, you know, this is your responsibility. But it's because it's the right thing to do. And it's better for you, and it's better for everyone. And, I mean, but it makes sense. And I always thought it made sense. You know, it's, you know, I never for a moment thought that that not disclosing was actually even really an option. It was just, for me, it was just wrong. And I asked my doctor, I said, well, is there sort of like a group I can join to kind of, work on this a bit? And he said, well, there are, but the groups in Toronto, the two big AIDS organizations, are against disclosure. And they actually put out position papers against disclosing your HIV status. I said, well, it's against the law. He said, that's right. He said, they feel that it's criminalizing sex, and it's sort of a complicated thing. And I didn't understand that at all. Like, I really it's when it's nonsense. When something just doesn't make sense. For me, I thought you'd want to sort of create an atmosphere where people were supportive of each other, and disclosure is the right thing to do, so we're all in it together. Very against that. And it bugged me, and I kind of bugged them, and I said, well, can we have a conversation about this? And they said, well, there's no conversation. And I just felt I didn't have a voice, and I was frustrated, and I was failing, actually. I was failing in my duty. I wanted some support and to be able to talk to people and maybe strategies and things like that. And I didn't know what to do. I just was frustrated, and I don't know, I felt I didn't have a voice. Until my friend Margaret Wente phoned me, and it was the International AIDS Conference, and she said, Peter, I'm thinking of doing like a thing, do you have any thoughts? And I said, yeah, no, I've got some thoughts. And I thought, I'm gonna have the loudest voice in town, the loudest, bulliest voice in town. And I was really excited, and I came up with some really provocative quotes, really provocative quotes. And right before she called back, I was sort of flipping through Extra magazine, and they had a teeny little article about three board members from one of the organizations had quit over the organization was having bathhouse tours for teenagers. And I couldn't resist telling her that, because that's like, it's gold, it would just, it caused a scene. And it caused a scene. She printed the article, and I didn't hear from her. And I thought, well, I'll go check out the AIDS conference. There was a big public area, so I went down. And I walked in, and there were 600 people protesting, and they had signs with my name on it. Peter, who's Peter, and why is he speaking for everyone? And it was a really odd experience, getting hate mail, and it's very, very strange. But nothing came of it. Nothing came of it. There was no dialogue. There was no debate. We don't expect much from a debate, but, I'd rather just go through the motions, let's just talk about things. So she wrote a second article, and this one was just about me. And it was about disclosing, and that I was frustrated that it wasn't a decision that was being supported, even though it's the decision that, the official decision, legal decision. And Dan Savage was quoted in it, and some other people. And there were a lot of really angry letters. Again, who's this Peter? I'm actually speaking for everyone. In this article, there were enough details about me that if you knew me, you could figure out it was me. She actually made a point of saying, I'm not going to use his last name, to protect his privacy. And about 3 months later, there was a decision in a case about someone who had knowingly transmitted HIV. And she wanted to do another article. And I said, well, I'll give you a couple quotes. And my doctor gave her a couple quotes. And it was this weird, I don't know what was going on in my mind, but a photographer suddenly showed up at the house, and I didn't really even think about it, and I hadn't spoken to her until I walked into Starbucks on Saturday, and my photograph was on the front page of the Globe and Mail, and she used my full name through the whole article. And I mean, everyone I ever knew or met, everyone. I mean, it was everywhere. It was just, a friend of mine was at a cottage. She's like, what the fuck is Peter doing on the cover of the Globe? Like, he didn't, I live with him and he didn't mention it. I'm like, because I didn't know, and these articles kept talking about wanting to do the right thing, and she did the wrong thing. She, in a way, took advantage of me. She really, really, really invaded my privacy. It became very difficult for me in some circles in Toronto. I mean, disclosing was a lot easier afterwards, which was, good. Oh yeah, you're that jerk that told everyone everything. I'm like, yeah, no, that's me. And I was gonna break up. Like, I just didn't want to talk to her anymore. But it was her birthday the next weekend, and she has these great parties. Full of politicians, and those 36 people that the CBC kind of rotates through all of their shows, like they're there. And everyone was, prime ministers and, people that, drove spaceships, it's not real life. And I didn't have an incentive to behave at this party, and you shouldn't have to have an incentive to behave at a party when it's celebrating someone's birthday that's made you very upset. So I went, and I was, I'm in line for the bathroom with Paul Martin, I'm talking to all these interesting people, and finally I'm in a corner with this, politician I'd loved since I was, in high school maybe. She'd been a cabinet minister in Brian Mulroney's government. And we were talking about some of the things that went on then. I said, the Shamrock Summit, you must have had a great time, because you're Irish. And she said, everyone thought I was Irish. I'm a Jew. She goes, no one knew I was a Jew. And then we started talking about tequila, and she said, I've never had tequila. So I got a couple glasses, tumblers, and a bottle of tequila. And our toast got louder, and when you're afraid that the glass is going to break. And I was really bad. I was very, I was putting her sort of up to this sort of little bit. I was pouring, and she has a very deep voice, and she was laughing, and anyway, we were actually having a great time. We were talking about, old politics and stuff. So finally, this tall gentleman walked up to us with our coats. The cabinet minister and I think former, external affairs, and me, and he said, it's late and we're all tired. People are starting to leave, and I've called each of you a taxi. I said, okay. And he actually kind of walked he marshaled us, I guess, sort of towards the door. And she goes, well, he should know, if it's time for us to leave. He should be the judge, since he's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ontario at the time. So he walked us out the door, and no appeals. And I haven't spoken to Margaret Wente since.